Welcome to the deep dive. Ever feel like you're just constantly putting out security fires?
Or maybe that your company's security rules feel a bit scattered, maybe even confusing.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving into two really key areas from ISO/INC 27003.2017 that can, well, help you move past that.
We're looking at Clause 10, which is all about improvement, and Annex A, which deals with the policy framework.
Think of this as your guide to understanding how these pieces fit together, the goal, to help you build a stronger, more resilient information security system.
Yeah, precisely. Clause 10 focuses on how you learn and grow from those, let's call them security hiccups.
And Annex A.
That gives you a solid structure, a blueprint, really, for laying down your security ground, rules, your policies.
And mastering these isn't just about, ticking boxes for compliance.
Not at all. It's about creating a security posture that's alive, that adapts, a living system.
Okay, let's dive in then. Clause 10 first, starting with how to handle those bumps in the road, nonconformities.
Yep, nonconformities, that's the starting point in 10.1.
Right. It sounds quite formal, nonconformity. What does that actually mean day to day for someone managing an ISMS?
So in simple terms, a nonconformity is basically any time your ISMS doesn't meet a requirement.
A requirement, like from the standard.
It could be from the ISO 27001 standard itself, yes, but it's broader than that. It could be a requirement you've set yourself in your own policies, or one that's just generally expected, like keeping data confidential.
Okay.
Or even a legal or contractual obligation. So you've got stated requirements, implied ones, and obligatory ones. If you fall short on any of those, that's a nonconformity.
So it's really more than just, say, failing an audit check. The source material lists quite a few examples, right?
Absolutely. Failing an audit check based on ISO 27001 is one, sure. But it could also be someone not following your internal ISMS rules.
Like skipping mandatory training.
Exactly. Or maybe a supplier isn't meeting the security levels you agreed on in the contract. That's a nonconformity. Project failures that have security consequences. Or simply a security control, maybe a firewall rule or something, that isn't actually working the way it's supposed to.
Okay, so it's quite wide-ranging.
It is. The key thing is recognizing that any deviation from your defined security rules of the road needs looking at, not just the massive breaches.
That makes sense. But if it's so broad, how do you even, spot these things? How do they usually surface?
Well, they can pop up in lots of ways. You might see weaknesses during your regular security activities, or maybe realize a control isn't quite as effective as you hoped.
Through monitoring.
Yes, or through analyzing security incidents. Sometimes customer complaints highlight them, or maybe users or even suppliers raise an alert.
Ah, okay.
And even if your metrics, your monitoring and measurement results fall below the criteria you set, or you find you're not meeting your information security objectives, those are signals too. Those are nonconformities.
Okay, so let's say you've spotted one. What's the immediate reaction? The source talks about corrections, like first aid.
Exactly like first aid. The immediate goal is damage control. Address the issue itself and deal with its immediate consequences.
So what might that look like?
It could mean switching systems to a safe or backup state, informing the people who need to know, monitoring the effects of what happened.
Like patching a leak quickly.
Precisely. You stop the immediate drip. But, and this is crucial, corrections alone don't stop the leak from happening again. They address the symptom, not the cause.
Right. And that's the distinction, isn't it, that leads us to corrective actions, moving beyond the quick patch.
Exactly. Corrective actions are about finding out why the pipe leaked in the first place and fixing that underlying cause permanently.
So it doesn't recur.
The first step, though, is deciding if you actually need a formal corrective action.
How do you decide that?
You look at the impact. How serious was the nonconformity? Is it likely to happen again? If it's minor and a one-off, maybe the correction is enough. But if it's significant or keeps happening, you need to dig deeper.
Okay, so you've decided, yes, we need corrective action. What's the process then?
You start by really reviewing the nonconformity itself. Understand it fully. Have similar things happen before. What were all the consequences? What corrections did we already apply?
Did the full picture.
Then comes the really critical part. Root cause analysis. You have to become a bit of a detective.
Find the why.
Exactly. What actually went wrong? Was it about people, process, technology, the environment? Are there patterns here? You're looking for the fundamental reason it happened.
So it's not about blame, but about understanding the system's flaws.
Precisely. And you also need to think broader. Could this issue point to similar weaknesses elsewhere in the ISMS? Does it suggest future risks we haven't considered?
Considering the ripple effects.
Yes. Once you've got that understanding the cause, the potential impact, then you determine the necessary corrective actions.
And these actions need to be proportionate.
Proportionate, yes.
Right.
And critically, they shouldn't introduce new risks themselves. No point fixing one hole just to create another.
Okay, makes sense. So you figure out what needs doing. How do you make sure it actually gets done effectively?
Good planning is key. You need to prioritize the actions, assign clear responsibility who owns this, and set realistic deadlines.
Standard project management stuff, almost?
In a way, yes. Then you implement the plan, but importantly, it doesn't stop there.
You need to check if it worked.
Absolutely. You have to assess the effectiveness of the corrective actions. Did they actually prevent recurrence? This assessment needs to be impartial, based on real evidence, and properly documented.
And communicated.
And communicated to the relevant stakeholders. The source also mentions keeping a non-conformity register, basically, a log of these issues and actions. It's your institutional memory, your lessons learned log.
One thing I noticed in the source, it doesn't explicitly talk about preventive action as a separate thing in the way older standards sometimes did. Why is that?
That's a really sharp observation. The 2013 version of 27001, which 27003 guides, integrated the concept of prevention into other clauses.
Ah, okay. Where?
Primarily in Clause 4.1, understanding the organization and its context, and Clause 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities. By identifying risks up front and planning actions to treat them, you are, in essence, taking preventative action.
So it's built into the risk management process itself. Be proactive about risks, and you prevent nonconformities.
That's the idea. It's about a risk-based approach from the start.
Okay, that covers handling problems really well. But Clause 10 isn't just about fixing things, right? It's Clause 10, improvement. It talks about continual improvement.
Exactly. Section 10.2. This is fundamental.
It sounds like going beyond just fixing what's broken.
It absolutely is. Continual improvement recognizes two key things. One, your organization changes, and two, the threat landscape changes constantly.
So even a good ISMS can't stand still.
Never. Even if your ISMS is working well, meeting requirements, managing risks, there's always scope to make it better, more effective, more efficient, maybe more aligned with changing business goals.
So improvement isn't only triggered by nonconformities.
No. It can be about exceeding requirements or finding smarter ways to do things, reducing inefficiencies, not just reacting to failures or risks. It's about fostering a proactive security culture. Complacency is the real enemy here.
Always asking, how can we do this better?
That's the mindset. And top management has a big role here, setting objectives for improvement. These might relate to effectiveness, cost efficiency, or the overall maturity level of the ISMS.
So how do you identify these improvement opportunities, if not just from fixing problems?
Yeah.
The source mentions assessments.
Yes. Regular assessment of the ISMS itself is key. You need to look at its suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness.
Okay, break those down a bit. Suitability.
Suitability means asking, does our ISMS still fit our context? Does it address our current internal and external issues, the needs of our interested parties, our objectives, the risks we face?
And adequacy.
Adequacy is about compatibility. Is the ISMS, as designed, appropriate for our specific organizational context, our culture, our structure?
And effectiveness, that sounds straightforward.
Effectiveness is about results. Is the ISMS actually achieving its intended outcomes? Is it meeting the organization's security needs? Is it managing risks effectively, handling nonconformities well? Are the resources aligned properly?
That's quite a comprehensive check.
It is. And some organizations might also look at efficiency. Could we achieve the same or better results using fewer resources? That's optional, but often valuable.
So these assessments provide fuel for improvement ideas. How do you act on them? Is it similar to corrective actions?
The process has similarities. Opportunities can come from nonconformity management, as we discussed, but also directly from these broader suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness reviews.
Okay.
Once you spot a potential improvement, you first evaluate if it's actually worthwhile pursuing. Is the benefit worth the effort or cost?
Makes sense.
If yes, you figure out what changes are needed within the ISMS. Then you plan and implement those actions, aiming to realize the benefits and, importantly, prevent any negative consequences.
And then evaluate again.
And then evaluate the effectiveness of those improvement actions. Do they deliver the expected benefits? It links back again to Clause 6.1. These improvement actions become part of your overall plan for addressing risks and opportunities.
Okay, that gives a really clear picture of Clause 10, reacting, learning, and constantly pushing to get better. Now let's shift gears to Annex A policy framework. The source says this is informative, not mandatory, so why spend time on it?
Good question. Even though Annex A isn't a set of requirements you have to meet for ISO 27001 certification, it provides incredibly useful guidance. Think of it as expert advice on how to structure all your security documentation,
Especially the policies.
especially the main information security policy and how it connects to all the other policies you might have in the organization. It helps bring order to potential chaos.
A blueprint for the rules, basically.
Exactly. A well-thought-out policy framework acts like your organization's security constitution. It provides clarity, sets direction.
So first things first, what does the source actually define as a policy?
It uses the standard ISO definition. Essentially, a statement of intentions and direction on a particular topic, formally expressed by top management.
So the high level, what we intend to do.
Precisely. And these policies guide actions and decisions relating to that topic across the organization.
Annex A talks about a hierarchy, right? Like layers of policies.
It does. It suggests that policies often exist in a hierarchy. You might have very broad top-level policies, like a general code of conduct for the whole company.
Okay.
Supporting that, you'll have more specific policies, including the main information security policy required by ISO 27001.
And beneath that.
Beneath the main IS policy, you typically have even more detailed topic-specific policies. These often align with the control areas in ISO 27002.
Examples.
Things like an access control policy, an information classification policy, a physical security policy, a cryptography policy, and so on. Some organizations might call these standards or directives or rules, but they all serve that purpose of providing detailed requirements.
So like a pyramid structure. Broad principles at the top, specific rules at the bottom.
That's a good way to visualize it, yes. Annex A even has a figure illustrating this concept. The key point is that the main information security policy fits into this wider structure.
But ISO 217,001 itself doesn't demand this specific hierarchy.
No, the standard just requires you have an information security policy. Annex A offers guidance on how it could relate to others for clarity and effectiveness.
Okay. When you're actually developing any policy within this framework, what inputs should you consider? Annex A gives guidance on that too.
It does, conceptually. It suggests you need to look at several things. What are the overall aims and objectives of the organization? What are its strategies?
The big picture context.
Exactly. Also, the existing organizational structure and processes. Then, more specifically, what are the aims and objectives for this particular policy topic?
Right.
Are there requirements flowing down from higher level policies that this one needs to align with? And crucially, who is the target audience? Who needs to read and understand this policy?
Considering all those angles helps make the policy relevant and effective.
Definitely.
Now, what about the actual content? Does Annex A suggest a typical structure for a policy document?
Yes, it provides a pretty logical template, although, again, it's guidance, not a rigid requirement.
What are the key sections?
Typically, you'd start with administrative info, title, version, effective date, review date, owner, approver, maybe its classification level, and who the intended audience is.
The metadata.
The metadata, yes.
Yeah.
Then often a short policy summary or abstract, an introduction explaining the topic, then a clear scope section, what parts of the organization, which activities does this apply to, any exclusions. It might also list related supporting policies here.
Okay, then the core stuff.
Then the core. Objectives, what is this policy trying to achieve? Principles, the fundamental rules or beliefs guiding actions and decisions related to the topic.
Like the do's and don'ts.
More the underlying rules that lead to the do's and don'ts. Then a responsibility section, who is accountable for what regarding this policy. This might detail roles and authorities.
Crucial for clarity.
Very. Some policies might outline key outcomes, the business results expected if the objectives are met. Then often a list of related policies for cross-reference. And finally, the detailed policy requirements themselves, the specific stipulations people need to follow.
That sounds very thorough. But you said it's flexible.
Absolutely. An organization might structure things differently. Maybe they organize heavily around roles, so the responsibilities section becomes central. The key isn't slavishly following this exact structure.
It's about making it clear and usable for your organization.
Precisely. The most important advice, though, is to avoid unnecessary duplication between policies. Use cross-references, keep it clear, keep it consistent, keep it manageable.
Okay, so pulling it all together. Clause 10 gives us the engine for driving improvement, reacting to issues, learning from them, and proactively getting better.
Right, the whole cycle of correction, corrective action, and continual improvement assessment.
And Annex A gives us a sensible way to structure the rule book, the policies that define the what's and how of our security, supporting that improvement cycle.
Exactly. A clear policy framework, as guided by Annex A, sets those expectations and responsibilities. That makes it much easier to spot when things go wrong, nonconformities, and to know what good looks like when you're aiming for improvement. Clause 10. They really do reinforce each other.
This has been incredibly insightful. If we were to boil it down, what are the absolute key takeaways for our listeners from Clause 10 and Annex A?
Okay, for Clause 10, don't just patch problems, corrections. Dig deep to find the root cause and implement corrective actions to stop them recurring. And critically, embrace continual improvement as an ongoing process, not just a reaction. Always look for ways to enhance your ISMS.
And for Annex A?
Remember that while Annex A is guidance, not mandatory, using its principles to create a structured, clear, and hierarchical policy framework is hugely valuable. It brings clarity, defines responsibility, and underpins your entire ISMS, making Clause 10's goals easier to achieve.
Excellent summary. So here's something to leave you with, a final thought to mull over. How could really embedding these ideas, structured policy management from Annex A, and the dynamic improvement cycle of Clause 10 genuinely transform how your organization thinks about and does information security?
Consider how moving from just reacting towards proactively managing policies and driving improvement could build a fundamentally more resilient and effective security posture for the long haul.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.